Have you ever felt like the war raged on inside you even when the battlefield was behind you? The war still echoed in my mind, but something unexpected happened. Every sound, every street noise, felt like a distant gunshot, and the silence of the early morning hours became more deafening than any explosion I'd ever heard. It was as if the world had returned to normal, but inside, the chaos continued. Perhaps you know this feeling, of being at peace on the outside, but at war on the inside. Stay with me until the end because what you discover now may surprise you. I remember the day I stepped back into my house. The walls were still there, the smell of my mother's cooking was in the air, but I wasn't the same. My body was there, but my mind still wandered between memories, between faces I would never see again. Life seemed to have picked up again, but I felt trapped in an invisible room, suffocated by my own memories. The war was over outside, but inside, not yet. Have you ever been there? Have you ever felt like no one around you truly understands the weight you carry? The nights were the worst. I'd close my eyes and it all came back. The voices, the screams, the metallic clang of weapons, the smell of dust mixed with fear. I'd wake up in the middle of the night sweating coldly, my heart racing, as if I were back in combat. No one saw these battles. They were invisible scars, marks that don't show on the skin but scream inside. And that's where many people lose their way, believing that the war will never end, that it will never be possible to feel true peace again. But it was in the midst of this inner desert that something began to change. It wasn't all at once, nor was it an instant miracle. It was a small spark, a simple gesture that brought an unexpected light within me. And strange as it may seem, it was at that precise moment that I began to realize that peace isn't something we find outside, but something that begins to emerge within, even when the world still seems to be falling apart. Perhaps you're wondering if this is truly possible. Can someone find peace while still struggling with memories, trauma, and fear? Is it possible to start over when it seems like everything is lost? That's exactly what I want to talk to you about today. Stay with me until the end because what follows may be exactly the answer you need to begin your own journey of transformation. What you're about to hear is not just a story of war but of life, a story of someone who discovered that even when the war isn't over, peace can begin to blossom from within, and that's when everything begins to change. And while I share this part of my story, I want to open a space for you too. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below with what has touched you most so far. It could be a feeling, a memory, or even a word that represents what you're experiencing. I read every comment, and it's incredible to see how these stories connect us and show that we're not alone on this journey. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people who may need this same message of hope. If you feel like this video speaks directly to your heart, please leave a like. It really helps the content reach others who may be going through something similar. And if you want to continue following stories like this, full of emotion, reflection, and transformation, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell. This way you'll be part of this growing community that believes that, even amidst internal wars, it's possible to begin building peace. Because this journey isn't just mine, it's ours, and what comes next will further demonstrate how this transformation process is real, possible, and begins in the most unexpected places. When I returned home, everything seemed the same, but I was no longer the same. The streets of my neighborhood were quiet. American flags still fluttered from porches. Neighbors waved as if it were a day of celebration, but inside me, there was a heavy silence. It was as if there were two versions of me. The soldier who learned to survive amidst chaos and the man who now had to relearn how to live amidst peace. I felt the ground beneath my feet, but it was as if I were still in the desert, carrying the weight of every memory, every decision I had to make back then. The first few days were the strangest. I'd wake up before sunrise, as if I were still at camp, and stand at the door, watching the sky lighten. The sound of a passing truck would make my body react without me even realizing it. It wasn't fear, it was something deeper. A kind of constant alert. This state of hypervigilance was part of me now. And how could I explain this to anyone? How could I tell my family that even as I hugged my children, my heart was miles away, remembering the brothers who hadn't returned with me? It's difficult to talk about this because there's an expectation that the soldier who returns home is a hero, a symbol of pride. And I felt pride, yes, but I also felt guilt. Guilt for having returned when others didn't have the same chance. Guilt for smiling when there were still families receiving folded flags at the national cemetery. This is the hidden truth that almost no one talks about. War doesn't end the day the uniform is laid away. It continues in every thought, in every memory that insists on appearing in the middle of a conversation or in the silence of the early morning. The strangest thing is that, from the outside, everything seems fine. You leave the house, buy a coffee on the corner, exchange a few words at the supermarket, and everyone believes your life is back to normal. But inside, there's a constant conflict, a battle you can't see. And it was at that point that I realized I needed to begin a journey of transformation, not to erase what happened, but to learn to carry it all differently, because pretending nothing happened only distanced me from the people I loved. The days passed, and I began to notice small details that had previously made no sense. The laughter of children playing in the street, the sound of church bells on Sunday, the smell of freshly cut grass in the yard, all of this began to bring me back to the present. But at the same time, these small memories were mixed with behind-the-scenes images of the war that only I had seen. It was like watching two films at once, one of life here, and the other of the reality that remained there. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because it was precisely in this internal conflict that the first decisions that changed my mindset began. I realized there was no point in fighting the memories, because they were part of who I had become. Instead, I began looking for ways to transform the pain into something that could make an impact, something that could give purpose to what I experienced. I still remember the first time I sat in the pew of my local church in a long time. The silence inside seemed stronger than my thoughts. It was as if someone told me I didn't have to win this war alone. Little by little, I began to open up to conversations I'd previously avoided. I spoke to childhood friends, told my father how I felt, and realized that sharing the truth was liberating. It wasn't about exposing weakness, but about allowing others into my story, and this began to change the way I saw everything. Each day stopped being just another day and became part of a reconstruction. It was as if I was learning to live again, with all the scars, but also with new choices. Right there, I am rebuilding from within. At night, the silence of the house became a battlefield. I would lie in bed and close my eyes, but instead of rest, images came. Every sound was a trigger. The sound of a door slamming made my heart race. The sound of fireworks in the neighborhood was enough to make me jump up, searching for something that wasn't there. The war had ended on the map, but in my mind, it continued. It was as if a part of me was still in that desert, watching the horizon, waiting for the next attack. This was my hidden truth, and for a long time I hid it from everyone around me. People told me I was lucky to be home, that now was the time to move on. But moving on seemed impossible. I'd sit at the dinner table and see my family smiling, chatting about everyday things, and I felt like an intruder in my own life. Words came slowly, as if each sentence had to cross an invisible barrier before reaching my lips. My children asked to play, and sometimes I simply couldn't. It wasn't a lack of love. It was a weight on my chest that prevented me from being fully present, and that hurt more than any physical wound. I began avoiding family gatherings, Sunday barbecues, and even the holiday parties that were once sacred to us. The noise of people laughing loudly, the hustle and bustle, it was all too much for me. It was as if I were trapped between two worlds, the world behind me, where I had to be alert to survive, and the world outside, which urged me to relax, smile, and simply exist. But how can you relax when your mind is still programmed to detect danger around every corner? Insomnia became a constant companion. I would sit on the living room sofa, staring out the window, waiting for the sun to rise. During these times, I would think of all those who never returned, of the faces that still visited me in my dreams. It was a mixture of sadness and gratitude. Sadness for them, gratitude for still being here. But this gratitude was accompanied by a sense of debt, as if I needed to do something to justify having survived. This internal pressure consumed me and made me even more distant from any idea of peace. It was during this phase that I realized how much my anxiety was taking over everything. I couldn't stay in closed spaces for long. Supermarkets, malls, even church became uncomfortable places. I always stayed near the door, with a mental plan for an emergency exit. It was exhausting living like this, always on high alert. My body felt trapped in an endless cycle of tension, and with each passing day, I wondered if I would ever be able to return to my former self. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because it was at this critical point that I began to realize I could no longer simply survive. I needed to face these ghosts head-on, or they would continue to dictate every step I took. It was then that I sought help, something that seemed like a difficult, almost impossible decision to me. Talking to someone about how I felt was like opening a box full of secrets I didn't want anyone to see. But it was in this act of quiet courage that my true transformation began. I remember walking into the office for the first time with sweaty hands and rapid breathing. I didn't say much that first day, but just being there changed something. The process was slow. Sometimes I left the sessions feeling heavier than when I entered, but little by little the pieces began to fall into place. I understood that I didn't need to fight the memories, that they were part of who I had become. It was possible to learn to live with them without them dominating me. I began to realize that asking for help wasn't a weakness. It was actually an act of strength. This new mindset was a turning point for me. At home, things started to change too. I was able to explain to my wife what I was feeling. She listened quietly, held my hand, and told me she was with me. This simple gesture had a huge impact. It was as if someone was telling me I didn't have to win this war alone. My children began to notice that I was more present, more willing to listen. There were still difficult nights, there were still nightmares, but now I had tools to deal with them. This journey was far from over, but something inside me had shifted. I felt like each small step I took was part of a larger reconstruction, a path I needed to take to reclaim my life. The war wasn't over, but I was learning to find peace, even amidst the memories. Write in the comments. I'm facing my ghosts too. I remember exactly the day something inside me began to shift. It was an ordinary late afternoon in the small town where I grew up, the kind where the sky turns orange and the sound of crickets fills the air. I was sitting on a park bench alone, trying to sort out the thoughts that were haunting me. It was then that an older veteran approached. He recognized me from some local ceremony and simply said, "Can I sit?" I nodded, and for a few minutes we sat in silence, gazing at the horizon. It was one of those silences that doesn't bother but comforts. Suddenly, he began talking about his own experience in the war, about what he felt upon returning home decades ago, and it felt like he was describing exactly what was happening inside me. His every word was a revelation, as if someone had finally translated the chaos I carried into something comprehensible. I heard about the fear, the guilt, the loneliness he also felt. He talked about the sleepless nights, the weight that wouldn't lift, and the day he decided he needed to truly live again. "You don't have to erase what you've lived to find peace," he said, looking straight into my eyes. That phrase stuck in my mind. It was as if someone had turned on a small light in a dark room. It wasn't a magic solution. It wasn't a promise that everything would be okay overnight, but it was the first time I felt like there might be a way. I returned home that night, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't just feel the heaviness. I felt something new, something that felt like hope. When I hugged my wife, I realized that simple gesture had a profound impact. I was there, whole, even with all the scars. She said nothing, just hugged me tighter, as if she knew something was happening inside me. And it was in that moment that I understood that the embrace of someone who loves you can be a kind of bridge, connecting what you were to what you can still become. In the following days, I began seeking out more conversations like that. I attended veterans meetings at the city community center. There I heard stories that made me laugh, cry, and most importantly, feel part of something again. I discovered that I wasn't alone in this silent battle, and that there were people willing to walk alongside me. This exchange was one of the most powerful experiences of my life. It was like seeing behind the scenes of other journeys, understanding that each person carried their own internal struggle, but also their own small victories. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because it was during this period that I made decisions that changed my mindset. I began writing down everything I felt in a notebook, without censorship, without fear. Each page became a way to release the weight from my mind and put it on paper. It was like cleaning out a room full of things that had been piling up for years. With each word I wrote, I felt lighter, and along with writing came new attitudes. I started walking every morning, paying attention to the sound of birds, the smell of fresh coffee, the little things that previously went unnoticed. This turning point didn't erase the scars, but it taught me to look at them differently. I realized they were proof that I had survived, that I was still here to tell this story, and it gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't felt since leaving the battlefield. I wanted my children to see that their father wasn't just a soldier scarred by war, but someone capable of reinventing himself and building something new from the ruins. It was as if every step I took was a silent message to them. There is life after pain. Right there, my light started to turn on. That small light that began to ignite within me led me to something I hadn't expected, the desire to seek a path to inner peace. It wasn't an easy decision, because for a long time I thought I had to handle everything alone, that asking for help was a sign of weakness. But the more I tried to face the internal battle without support, the more it seemed to swallow me up. Then one day, I walked into a church in my city almost without planning. I sat quietly in the back pew and just listened. The silence of that place had a different weight. It felt like the air was lighter, as if someone were saying to me, "You don't have to carry this alone." I didn't say anything that day, but I left with my heart less heavy, as if I had left part of the burden on the floor of that church. After that, I began searching for other ways to understand what was going on inside me. I decided to return to therapy, something I'd tried before, but without much dedication. This time was different. I entered the office determined to open every door, even those I'd locked for years. The process wasn't easy. Talking about what I saw, what I did, the decisions I'd had to make in extreme situations, was like revisiting the battlefield again. But this time I wasn't alone. Each session became an opportunity to reorganize my thoughts, to name what I felt, to understand that guilt and fear didn't have to define me. Alongside this, I began to create a simple routine. I would wake up early and take walks through the neighborhood streets, watching the sunrise. It was a moment of my own, where I could breathe deeply and realize I was there, alive, present. The smell of coffee wafting from the houses, the distant sound of someone starting their car to go to work. All of this seemed to remind me that life went on, and that I could be a part of it again. I also started writing. I grabbed a notebook, and every day I wrote down what I felt, without thinking about how the words sounded. It was like lifting weights from my mind and putting them on paper. This practice was a turning point, because little by little, I began to notice patterns, to understand which memories hurt me most and which gave me the strength to move on. This journey brought me even closer to my family. I started talking more, sharing little details about my day, allowing them to see my vulnerabilities. At first it was strange because I was used to hiding everything, but their reaction was welcoming. My wife would silently hold my hand when she saw I was more tense. My children started calling me to play again. And little by little, I began to accept these invitations. It was as if each of their gestures was pulling me back into life, reminding me that I was not just the soldier who fought a war, but also the father and husband who could laugh, play, and build new memories with them. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because this transformation wasn't just emotional, it was also spiritual. I'm not talking about religion, but about something bigger, a sense that there's a purpose to everything I've experienced. I began to see meaning in even the most painful parts of my story. Every loss, every scar, every sleepless night seemed to prepare me to be someone different, someone stronger and more aware. It was at that moment that I understood that inner peace isn't the absence of pain, but the ability to find meaning in it. I also discovered the power of helping others. When I began sharing my story in small groups of veterans, I realized that many of them carried the same burden as me. Talking about it openly became a form of healing, not just for me but for them as well. It was as if each word broke down a bit of the wall that separated us from the outside world, and the impact was enormous. I saw hope in their eyes, and it reinforced my own. Today, when I walk the streets of my city, I feel like every step is a victory. The war remains part of my history, but it no longer controls who I am. There are still difficult days, there are still painful memories, but now they don't paralyze me. They are reminders of where I've been and how much I've grown since then. And it's this sense of growth, of true transformation that keeps me going. Write in the comments, "I'm learning to live again." The first changes were almost imperceptible, but I felt each one as small victories in a field I no longer believed I could win. One of my first achievements was being able to sleep a full night without waking up in a cold sweat. I remember that when I opened my eyes and saw daylight streaming through the window, I felt something different, a strange calm, a sense that my body had finally rested. It was as if the internal clock that kept me constantly alert had slowed down, even if only for a few hours. This brief respite gave me the strength to face the day in a new way. Little by little, I noticed my face changing too. The mirror began to reveal expressions I'd forgotten existed. A genuine, effortless smile appeared one ordinary afternoon when my son told me something funny that had happened at school. For a moment I laughed along with him, and the laughter was so natural that I almost got emotional. It was a simple gesture, but for me it was a milestone. It was proof that I could feel joy again, that the darkness hadn't swallowed me whole. These small moments began to multiply. I began to sit at the table with my family without feeling out of place. I began participating in conversations, telling stories about my day, and even sharing fond memories from my time serving. Talking about it no longer felt like such a heavy burden, because I could now separate what hurt me from what made me proud. This distinction was important, because it allowed me to show my children that even in the most difficult situations, there is still learning, courage, and resilience. I also started taking better care of myself. I swapped quick meals for a leisurely breakfast, something that reminded me of my childhood. I remember sitting on the porch with a warm mug and smelling the coffee mingling with the cool morning air. Those few minutes became a silent ritual, a way to reconnect with myself before the day began. And this daily connection strengthened something within me, a kind of confidence that I could keep moving forward. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because these small gestures were more than habits. They were conscious decisions to give myself a second chance. Every walk in the park, every time I chose to talk instead of isolating myself, every time I accepted an invitation to go out with friends was like building a bridge between the past and the present. And this bridge gave me something I hadn't had in a long time: perspective. I began to see that my life wasn't limited to what had happened on the battlefield, that I could still write new, different, meaningful chapters. It was at this point that I began to get involved in community activities. I attended veterans events, helped with donation drives for military families, and even gave a talk at a local school about resilience and courage. Each of these experiences reminded me that what I experienced could inspire others to find strength in their own struggles. This impact was powerful because for the first time I wasn't just receiving support, I was also offering it. It made me feel useful in a whole new way, as if the soldier within me had found a new mission: to help others not feel alone. There were still difficult days, of course. There were times when the weight would creep back in and I had to take a deep breath to keep from falling. But now there was a difference. I knew those days wouldn't last forever. I had tools. I had people by my side, and most of all, I had hope. This combination was what kept me going, even when everything seemed dark. Comment here: every step counts. Even with all the small victories I'd been achieving, the journey had been far from straightforward. I realized that each step forward was accompanied by small setbacks, as if life wanted to remind me that healing doesn't happen overnight. There were nights when the weight would suddenly return, without warning. The sound of a truck passing by could be enough to make my heart race, my breathing quicken, and leave me motionless in bed, my body drenched in sweat. At those times, I felt as if I'd been dragged back to the battlefield, as if the years of distance meant nothing. It was a strange, almost cruel sensation, as if my own mind were testing me to see if I was truly ready to move on. These moments shook me deeply because they brought with them the question: was everything I'd been building crumbling? Was I just fooling myself, faking a transformation that didn't exist? It was at these times that the urge to give up hit me hardest. There were days when I simply didn't want to get out of bed, didn't want to go to therapy sessions, didn't want to see anyone. It seemed easier to close myself off again and put up the walls I'd begun to tear down, to go back to living behind an invisible armor. But something inside me reminded me that this choice would only take me back to square one. I took a deep breath and thought of all the small achievements I had already achieved. The first night of restful sleep, the first spontaneous laugh, the first heartfelt conversation with my wife. These memories acted like anchors, keeping me steady when everything seemed to be shaking. I told myself, if I've made it this far, I can't turn back now. And it was this conscious decision, repeated every day, that kept me taking another step, even when my whole body was screaming for me to stop. One of the most memorable episodes of this period occurred on an autumn morning. The sky was gray, the cold wind carried the scent of dry leaves, and the city was silent. I was home alone when I heard a loud noise in the street. My body reacted before I even realized it. My muscles tensed, my heart raced, and for a few seconds I felt the same fear I'd felt at the front. When I realized there was no danger, I sat on the couch and cried. I cried for everything I'd been through, for everything I still carried, and for all the times I'd tried to appear strong when, in fact, I was crumbling inside. This crying was painful, but at the same time it brought a kind of relief I hadn't felt in years. It was as if I'd opened a door that had been locked deep within my soul. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because it was precisely during these relapses that I found some of the most important revelations of my journey. I discovered that healing isn't a straight line, that it's more like a road full of curves, potholes, and surprises along the way. Each setback, no matter how painful, taught me something new about myself. I realized I wasn't regressing, I was being refined. It was as if each challenge was a test, a way of showing me that I was no longer the same person who returned from the war on the first day. I was more aware, more prepared to face the shadows that came to visit me. Another major obstacle was dealing with the fear of being judged. Talking about what I felt was difficult, because there's a huge expectation that veterans are the perfect, strong, and unshakable hero. At first, I was embarrassed to admit that I was suffering, that I had anxiety attacks, that I still woke up in the middle of the night as if I were on the battlefield. But each time I shared my story, someone would reach out and say, "I go through this too." This exchange created a sense of community I never imagined I'd find. It was as if, by exposing my scars, I gave permission for others to show theirs. This connection was powerful and gave me the strength to carry on, even on the darkest days. These ups and downs taught me patience with myself. I learned that one bad day doesn't erase an entire week of progress. I learned that it's normal to feel fear from time to time, and that this fear can be used as fuel to keep moving forward. I discovered that vulnerability doesn't make me weak, but rather makes me human. And it was this mindset, built little by little, that kept me going. Each time I fell and got back up, I felt myself growing stronger, more aware of what truly mattered. This phase also taught me to respect my limits. There were days when I needed to stop, breathe, and just be. It wasn't about productivity nor about proving anything to anyone. It was about allowing myself to feel and take care of myself. In these pauses, I realized how healing silence could be. Sitting on the porch, looking up at the sky, and feeling the wind on my face became one of my favorite moments. It was simple, but it reminded me that life went on, and that I could be a part of it in a new way. These experiences showed me that the healing journey isn't about erasing the scars, but about learning to live with them. It's about transforming pain into something that can have a positive impact, something that inspires others to find strength in their own battles. Every hardship I faced became a reminder that I was alive, that I had a new chance to make different choices. And these choices, however small, built a path of hope beneath my feet. Write in the comments, "I will not give up." There came a moment when I realized something inside me was truly changing. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't as if someone had erased all the pain with a single gesture. But one day I realized my body was no longer constantly on alert. My breathing became lighter. My heart beat at a calmer rhythm. And for the first time in a long time, I was able to sit on the porch, look at the sky, and simply be present. It was a feeling difficult to explain. It wasn't a complete absence of pain or memories, but a quiet peace that settled there, as if saying, "You survived, now it's time to live." That was my inner victory, the point at which I understood that the war would continue to exist in my memory, but it would no longer dictate my present. I noticed this change in details I'd previously ignored. The smell of fresh coffee in the morning was no longer just an aroma, but an invitation to start the day calmly. The sound of children playing in the yard, which had previously made me restless, now made me smile. Even moments of silence, which had previously suffocated me, became places of refuge, where I could think, reflect, and be grateful for still being here. It was as if a new mindset was forming, one that allowed me to see beyond the scars and appreciate the simple act of living. This transformation was also visible to those around me. My wife began to look at me differently, no longer with the constant worry she'd carried in the beginning, but with a glimmer of hope. My children began calling me to play, and this time I accepted, unafraid that an unexpected noise would make me freeze. Every laugh I shared with them was like a brick in the reconstruction of my life. It was a reminder that I hadn't just survived the war. I was being reborn in the midst of civilian life, finding meaning in things that had previously seemed mundane. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because what I found wasn't just peace, it was a kind of reconciliation with myself. For a long time I blamed myself for coming back, for being alive when others weren't. But gradually I understood that carrying this guilt didn't honor anyone's memory. What truly honored those left behind was living in a way that gave meaning to their sacrifice. This revelation changed everything for me. I began to wake up every day with the conscious decision to do something good, to make a positive impact even if it was on a small scale. A conversation, a gesture of kindness, a moment of listening, all of these became part of my purpose. I also learned to respect my own limitations. Having inner peace didn't mean I wouldn't have bad days. And that was liberating. There were times when memories came flooding back, and instead of fighting them, I learned to embrace them. I would close my eyes, take a deep breath, and recall everything I had already achieved. It was as if each difficult memory was now proof of my resilience, a mark that reminded me of where I had come from and where I was now. And that gave me the strength to keep going, to not give up when things got tough. The most powerful thing was realizing I could talk about the war without feeling like I was reliving every pain. I began telling stories of courage, friendship, and overcoming, and each time I did, I felt a part of my heart healing. That's why I say peace began within me, because it didn't come from outside. It didn't come from the end of the conflicts, nor from a magical solution. It was born the day I decided my life was worth more than the memories that haunted me. It grew with every step, every conversation, every embrace I allowed it to reach me. Today, when I look in the mirror, I see someone who still bears scars, but who also has a sparkle in their eyes. I see someone who carries difficult stories but has learned to transform them into fuel to help others. That's why I say with conviction, the war isn't over, but peace has begun within me. And this peace, even if silent, is what drives me to continue building a different future. Leave a comment. My peace has also begun. When I reflect on the journey I've traveled, I realize that the marks I bear are not signs of weakness, but of survival. Each scar is like a silent medal, a reminder that even when all seemed lost, I kept breathing, kept moving. This realization deeply affected me. I spent years trying to hide these wounds, as if they were something to be ashamed of, but today I understand that they are precisely what tell my story. And if you look at your own life, you'll realize that you also bear marks that speak of who you are, what you've faced, and how much you've overcome to get here. It was when I began to see things this way that everything changed. I stopped seeing myself as someone who was simply surviving the war, and began to see myself as someone capable of writing a new chapter. This shift in mindset was like opening a window in a closed room years ago. Suddenly, air came in, light came in, and I could see things differently. The pain didn't disappear, but it was no longer the center of everything. I was able to find meaning in what I experienced. And finding meaning doesn't mean justifying the pain. It means transforming it into something that drives me forward. I learned that resilience isn't about being unbreakable, but about rebuilding yourself, even if it's in pieces, even if it's slow. It's about falling, getting up and falling again if necessary, but not giving up. It's about looking in the mirror on a bad day and saying to yourself, you've been through worse, and you'll get through this too. This is the hidden truth no one told me at first, that strength isn't in the absence of falls, but in the decision to always get up one more time than you fell. And courage. Courage is a subject that fascinates me. For a long time, I associated courage with what I experienced on the battlefield, entering dangerous zones, facing danger head-on, protecting my comrades. But civilian life taught me another kind of courage, the courage of looking within, facing my fears, and admitting my vulnerability. It was much harder to say, I need help, than to face certain situations I experienced out there. And yet, it was this silent act of asking for help that began to change everything. This was one of the greatest revelations of my journey, understanding that the most transformative courage is the kind that allows us to be seen as we truly are, without masks. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because I want you to realize that all of this doesn't just apply to me. You may never have set foot on a battlefield, but you know the weight of the emotional battles we fight in silence. It could be a loss you haven't overcome, a mistake you carry in your heart, a broken relationship that has left scars. These are invisible wars that require the same resilience, the same courage, and the same resolve to carry on. And in the same way, you too can find peace. Perhaps this is the most powerful point of this reflection. Peace isn't something that happens when everything around you is perfect. Peace begins when you decide you're no longer going to be held hostage by the pain that paralyzes you. When you make the decision to walk, even with fear, even without knowing if it will work, something changes inside you. It's like turning on a light in a dark place. You don't see the whole path, but you can see enough to take the next step. And believe me, sometimes it's that single step that changes everything. From that moment on, each choice begins to carry a different weight. You realize you don't need to solve everything at once. You don't need to have all the answers. Just allow yourself to move forward a little more today than you did yesterday. Just remember that difficult days don't define your entire story. That's how I began to build something new, one day at a time, one decision at a time. And it was at this pace that peace began to grow within me, filling the spaces where before there had only been fear. The impact this had on my life was immense. I began to notice that even the people around me changed. My children began to see me differently. My wife said she began to feel like I was truly present again. It wasn't just about stopping suffering. It was about learning to live wholeheartedly, connectedly, and truly. It was about dreaming again. Because yes, after everything I'd been through, I started having dreams again. Simple dreams like seeing my children graduate, traveling with my family, laughing at silly things around the dinner table. These dreams are the fuel that keeps me going. And that's what I want to convey to you. Starting over is possible. No matter how devastating your battle has been, there's always a chance to rebuild. It may take time, it may hurt, it may require difficult decisions, but it's possible. And the most beautiful thing is that when you choose to get back up, you end up inspiring others to do the same. This is the part that moves me most, realizing that my transformation isn't just mine. It also touches those who walk alongside me. So if you're going through a difficult time, take a deep breath and remember that you're still here. And being here is already a sign that there is hope. It's not about ignoring the pain, but about deciding that it won't be the end of your story. You have the power to write the next chapter, to change course, to give meaning to what you've experienced. This is the message I'd like to imprint on your heart today. Comment here. I choose to start over. After everything I've shared so far, I need to tell you something important. Every word you heard wasn't just meant to tell a story, but to open a space where you could also see yourself. If this story touched your heart in some way, it's because you carry within you the same capacity for transformation. The simple fact that you're here, following along this far, already shows that you're thirsty for change, that you want to find something that makes sense. And that's why this space exists, so we can journey together. Your participation is a fundamental part of this journey. When you leave a comment, you're not just talking to me. You're leaving a mark that can reach someone who needs that message. When you write about your feelings, share a word, an experience, or even a simple reaction, you're creating a place where others can recognize themselves and realize they're not alone. This is how the message grows, how the impact goes beyond this screen and reaches where it needs to go. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because this kind of interaction has a power that goes far beyond what it seems. Every time someone identifies with this story, comments, and opens their heart, something changes within them. It's a first step, a silent decision to look at one's own life and say, I can change too. And this decision, when shared, inspires others to do the same. It's a chain of hope that forms from simple gestures. So if you felt something while listening to all this, if any part of my story resonated with you, write here in the comments what went through your mind. It could be a word, a short phrase, or just something that summarizes what you're feeling right now. This creates a record of your moment and helps you realize that you're beginning a new chapter. It's almost like writing a letter to your future self saying, I was here, and something started to change. When you like this post, you help this message gain traction and reach more people who may be experiencing something similar. Think of it as holding a flashlight and lighting the way for someone walking in the dark. And if you feel like continuing this journey with me, following along every step, subscribe so we can walk side by side. This space is for you, for us, for everyone who believes it's possible to transform pain into strength and rebuild a meaningful life. And I really want to hear from you. What does the word peace mean in your life today? Write in the comments, my pieces, and fill in whatever comes to your heart. If you've made it this far, I want to truly thank you for walking this journey with me. It's incredible to think that somehow our paths intersected today. If this video spoke to your heart, please leave a like so I know this message resonated with you. This motivates me to continue bringing you stories that touch you deeply. And if you want to follow me on this journey, subscribe to the channel. This is a space for those who believe that it's always possible to rebuild, even after the most difficult battles. Write in the comments, I made it to the end with you, so I know you stuck with me until this point. I love seeing who was there until the very last second. And if you want to continue diving into this topic, there's a video right here that complements all of this and delves even deeper into this conversation. Click through and stay with me there, because our journey is just beginning.